Take control of your finances. Gain insights from top industry professionals. Financial topics that matter to you from your go-to resource. This is Right on the Money with your host, Dennis Mattern.
Hey, Dennis Mattern here with Right on the Money, out on location with two great friends of the show that I want to introduce you to. First off, Terry DuPont of DuPont Advisory Group, Becky Swansburg of Stonewood, and we're here. So Becky, you're a speaker.
That's correct.
At this event, and Terry's here as well, but we're going to be talking about legislation and what's available, what's going to be happening for clients. And those are the very clients that you work with in your practice.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So Becky, give us for those folks that can't be here with us and get the pleasure of hearing you speak, what are some of the key things that people, savers, folks looking at retirement should be looking at? And then how does a guy like Terry get in there and help them make this a reality?
So one of the things I think many savers are realizing in today's environment is that, in the past when we thought about retirement in the future and saving, we focused on maybe market risk, right? Is the market going to return? What is fixed income going to do? Maybe we thought about income risk. Am I going to outlive my income? More and more, we're realizing that tax risk and legislative risk are going to play just as important roles in the success or failure of our retirement approach as the market and as kind of your income strategies. So legislative risk, if people aren't familiar with that concept, it's really the concept that Congress changes the rules, and those changes negatively impact a saver's retirement strategy. It's particularly acute around taxes. So like many Americans, most of us have saved in these qualified accounts, 401ks, IRAs, Terry, you know that. One of the features of these qualified accounts is you are deferring your tax responsibility to the future. And that means that any changes Congress makes between today and the day you take that last dollar out of your 401k or IRA, if those legislative changes cause taxes to rise, well, suddenly you're sending more of your money to the IRS in Washington, and you have less to spend on yourself.
Now, you have a great quote that I've seen up on your presentation before, that there's two tax systems in the United States. Can you give us that quote? And then I'm going to have to ask Terry how he applies this knowledge. But
right, it's actually not my quote. It's from Judge Learned Hand, who was a U.S. Court of Appeals judge. And he said, there are two systems of taxation in this country, one for the informed and one for the uninformed. I think savers are realizing that as they look at kind of the future of what's happening in Washington when it comes to taxes. They want to be saving under that system of the informed saver.
Now, Terry, I have to ask you, so with the two types of tax systems that are out there, are people shocked when you lay this out to them and help them with their retirements?
Absolutely, because what most people need to understand, number one, is that taxes will have a much bigger impact on your net worth and your future than any rate of return ever will. And so it's important to focus on the taxes, because it can play a bigger part than anything else, really, especially in this economic environment and tax environment. So we help people to minimize the taxes using some of the strategies that Becky's firm brings to us, so that they can spend more money in retirement and not have to pay it all in taxes or so much.
Now, Becky, with your experience, and we don't want to get political and reds and blues and everyone start fist fighting here, but with your expertise, one, can you share with the audience a little bit about your background? Because I think that's awesome. And then going forward with a book that you have all put together, where you talk about looking at not COVID, but what happens after COVID, when this pandemic is done and all these things that we had to spend money on.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
But a little bit about your background, and then talk a little bit about what we're looking at post-pandemic here.
Yeah, so I kept my career in Capitol Hill in Washington. I started out in the White House under George W. Bush's first administration, and then moved over to Capitol Hill, where I worked for the Speaker of the House and a couple members of Congress. And it was interesting because my time in Washington really imprinted upon me the impact that taxes can have on savers, but how few savers really understand that risk. Yeah. And Terry, I know we've talked a lot that we call taxes kind of the biggest, least understood retirement risk that most savers face. And so coming out of the pandemic, what do we expect from Washington? Well, probably a lot of the more that we've seen during the pandemic coming out of Washington. No matter what side of the spectrum, political spectrum you fall on, I think what we've come to realize over the last maybe 6 years is that there's a lot of instability right now in Washington. and there's a lot of swings between the party. And just as a reality of our two-party system, that means that we're going to see a lot of legislation that's maybe a little farther out than we've seen historically, kind of in the near past. When you look at the pandemic, trillions and trillions of dollars in new economic stimulus spending to get us through the pandemic. Our national debt is at an all-time high of, it's interesting. In December, if you'd asked me, I would have said $28 trillion. Now it's up over $30 trillion with the T. I mean, every month we are adding trillions of dollars to the debt. So what have we seen with the president and Congress and the Build Back Better bill? Well, a lot of new spending opportunities, and then that has to be funded by a lot of new tax initiatives.
We're going to take a quick break, and what I want to do when we come back on the other side, Terry, I want to hear from you a little bit about some concerns you're hearing, because you've helped literally thousands of people retire, but retire successfully, super important, and some of the challenges that you're seeing and helping people overcome. So join us on the other side of the break. We'll see you there.